Hi everyone, this is Jeremiah from New Life Counseling. Hey, I want to talk a little bit about a thing called PTSD. All right. Now, hopefully I'm not going to get banned. I would say for almost every article or blog I've ever written about post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what PTSD stands for, has been banned. Whether it was Facebook, whether it's Google. I'm just like, hello, I'm a therapist. Just because some of the words can have very graphic content. So I want to be very mindful. This is not going to be a graphic content. If you have PTSD, my hope is to not trigger you, but to give you hope and to allow you to understand maybe just a few different therapies that are out there now that many therapists are finding really amazing outcomes with to support post-traumatic stress disorder. And I want to add on a side note, if you're not dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, but you're dealing with other challenges like anxieties, depression, you're dealing with maybe just what some would call smaller trauma rather than big T trauma, all these different terms that you may or may not have heard about. I want you to know some of these therapies, if it works for this, it's been discovered they work really good as well for this stuff. So maybe stick around and let's check it out and see what we're going to do. Hey, in the meantime, I haven't said this in a couple of videos, but, please click and subscribe. And because the more likes and the more subscriptions happen, the more these videos can continue to go on. All right, enough of that stuff. Let's get to why you're watching this video. All right, post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm not going to get into the too many details of it, but as it's broken down, in other words, it happened some point in the past, and it was traumatic. And what it created was this stress disorder that allows me to not function in life. The old-fashioned stereotype, because this term really came back out in those, in the Vietnam War days. You get the soldier coming home from war, and, all they heard was gunfire and gunshots all day. They're back home now, and, they're walking down the street and a car goes by, and because they maybe have the bad carburetor, it backfires. All of a sudden, it sounds like a shot. And they're like, oh, and they're back in the war and they're messed up for the rest of their week. Whew, tough stuff. But it's not always that too. It could be you were in a car accident. It could be something happened and you just cannot fly. And I can't fly and I'm terrified and I have a job to do and I've got to get to work because I have to go up north and that is trauma. Now, in my case, legally, I have to say observable trauma, okay? But even if it is observable trauma, it needs to be dealt with, whether it's considered post-traumatic stress disorder or little trauma. Trauma is still trauma. It affects our life in a negative way at some point. It's not if but when something triggers us and we are not functioning, and we got to figure out how to deal with this so we can function and be calm, caring, and able to do our day productively. All right, so what do we do with this? Well, lots of different therapies, all right? But the ones that I wanted to really focus on in particular are what are known as eye movement therapies. Now, eye movement therapies have been around, depending on literature, 40 to 50 years now, all right? There is other literature from before that, but as far as we'll call it coined phrases and advertised trademark names go, 40 to 50 years, all right? Specifically, the first one that came out was really noticed, and that was called an emerging modality, which means that it was new and people were checking it out to see if it was going to work or not long term, et cetera, et cetera. It was called EMDR. Now, EMDR, boy, you got to love these acronyms, right, in this field. It's crazy. So let me break it down for you. E stands for eye, M stands for motion. It's where your eyes go back and forth, or these days, a lot of times, therapists who do EMDR, we use these things called TheraTappers, and they go bzz, 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 bzz. and no, they don't electrocute you. They're just buzz. And it's what is known as bilateral stimulation. You see, some of the videos that you may have watched already and future videos you're going to watch potentially, we talk about how we have a prefrontal cortex, which is our thinking side of the brain. We got the mid part of our brain, well, it's more back here, but that's called the limbic system, which is the emotional center. Those are really two primary areas that many therapists focus and support clientele with. Now, in that, all right, that's where trauma gets rooted and stuck. Sometimes. Because sometimes it's not always in the mind and brain. A lot of science in the last 60, 70 years has discovered that many things that happen up here actually get stored in our body. So if, let's say, I'm dealing with anxiety or stress, and I'm like, it's amazing how up here is all happening, but I'm feeling it here. Or maybe it's in my belly, and it's all, it's feeling all weird and squishy, and I'm gonna throw up. Wow. That is happening, as they say, all in the mind. But these messages are sent down through what's known as the ventral vagus nerve system. And they hit these different parts, sending messages. Okay, boys, freak out. And we're going to freak out in the chest right now. What's happening in me? Hey, you know what happens positively too, like when we're in love. Oh, I'm so in love. Well, that's all happening here. Okay. It's just that it's sending messages. Have your heart palpitate in weird ways. And, that must be love. Maybe. And so with that, that's the ventral vagus nerve system. This is a term, then, what's known as physiologically, which is a connection between our mind and our body. Now, although most therapists focus primarily, again, on the brain, the mind, prefrontal cortex, limbic system, there is a concept physiologically known as somatic therapy as well, where our body, as a world-renowned Dr. Bessel van der Kolk talks about, the body keeps the score. Love that title of the book. It reads itself just with the title. The body keeps the score. They've done research stuff from, my current understanding from back even in the 60s. And I know guys like Gabor Mate, they've been doing a lot of current research because he himself is a medical doctor. And they've been doing research again with things like, when people are having anxiety, or if they're dealing primarily with, let's say, fear, it's amazing how often many people will come, even in here I've seen it, they will have lower back issues. Now, if it's because of a car accident or I was dropped on my back as a child, that's physical, not physiological, not to confuse the terms. But here's the thing. If you are totally healthy and yet your lower back and you're like, why? And it's not because of I'm growing, or it's, I'm 20 and I'm still growing. I'm going through a growth cycle. No, you could be like 35 and you're like, why is my lower back so? I wonder if you deal with major deep-rooted fear. Because quite often, it's not always, but sometimes it's been discovered that ventral vagus nerve system messages, it stores that fear in the lower back area. Just like our chest stores stress and tension for many people who deal with anxiety or stress, or in the belly. Interesting. So these therapies like EMDR and other ones I'll mention also quite often not just deal with the cognitive side of the brain or the emotional part of the brain, but they also deal with the physiological part of the mind-body connection, which is the somatic part of our body. Interesting. All right. Well, I don't know about you, but it's nice if you're feeling here to get rid of that. And yeah, it can happen. There's some really cool techniques. By the way, one of them you may have already learned watching these videos. Intentional deep-rooted breathing. And then maybe adding some extra things like our imagination and doing some bilateral stimulation. Maybe an advanced video we'll do down the road. But just giving you some things that, these things can actually move and adjust and go, never to be seen again. powerful when it happens.